Straight up. Watching Christians United Broadcasting Network, CUBN, where we want to see you be encouraged in Jesus' name. Glory to God. Welcome back to your Way Happy Bible Study on CUBN. Let's get back into it. I think Troy's got us back up. If you have trouble with Facebook, you can go over to YouTube, but what we just experienced was the network went down. The network in Florida. The CUBN network went down and we froze up, but we're back now. Praise the King. Hopefully we won't have that kind of problem again. Hopefully not. Let's go ahead and get back into our study. We are in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 13. Thou shalt not kill. Well, let's do 12 because we're not sure that if we, not sure if we got 12 on there. Let's do 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So he's saying if you honor your parents, it comes with a promise that your days may be long upon the land. If you honor your parents, that is, you have a far better chance at a long life here. In verse 13, thou shalt not kill. Now the Hebrew translation, thou shalt not murder. This isn't saying don't step on a bug that's in your house. This is saying don't murder anyone with intent. In verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery is a physical relationship or even emotional relationship with someone outside of your marriage covenant. If you're married and you are playing with fire with somebody outside of your marriage, you are committing adultery. There is emotional adultery as well as physical. There's also spiritual adultery. If you are messing with other gods, which they don't really exist. There aren't other gods, but God said, thou shalt have no other gods before me. A god to you is anything you put above him. You don't do that. In verse 15, thou shalt not steal. We all know what that is. You don't take things that don't belong to you. In verse 16, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Don't tell lies on people. Don't talk and spread something false about someone. In verse 17, thou shalt not cover thy neighbor. Let me start again. 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. And to covet means that you want those things for yourself. You look at those things and you're feeling an envy. Oh, why does that person have such a good wife and I don't? Why does that person have a really have a nice new boat and I don't? You see those feelings that will churn up inside you. Anything that's their neighbor's, don't covet it. In verse 18, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. When they saw these things, they all started backing up. In verse 19, and they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. They're scared to death for God to speak to them. They do not want for God to speak to them. So they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. For God to attempt to speak to the whole congregation, it scared them all out of their wits. And they're like, we don't want God to talk to us. We'll listen to you, Moses. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. God is appearing to them so they will go, oh, wow, and they'll think twice before blatantly sinning before him. In verse 21, and the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. In verse 22, and the Lord said unto Moses, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Ye shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall ye make unto you gods of gold. Now, isn't that interesting? He specifically said this, and what's the first thing they do? Make a golden calf while Moses is up in the mount getting the 10 Commandments. In verse 24, an altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings. See, he had taught them how to do burnt offerings, and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. In verse 25, and if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. So he says, if you make an altar of stone, don't take any of your tools to those stones to make them flat or whatever. He says, thou shalt build it of, okay. And if thou wilt make me an altar, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. That means a stone that has had a tool on it to change its shape. For thou hast polluted it if thou lift up thy tool upon it. Okay. In verse 26, neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. So, neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. That's interesting. I wonder what that means. He didn't want steps installed to go up to the altar. In verse 21, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. In verse 2 of Exodus chapter 21, if thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. You don't charge him for his freedom. The 7th year, you set him free. In verse 3, if he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. So this is interesting. He's saying that if thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. So if he's married when you purchase him, see, these people used to sell themselves as servants, knowing they would be freed in the 7th year, because a lot of them couldn't take care of their family. And so they would sell themselves as a servant so they could take care of their families. Now it says, if his master have given him a wife. Now, if he comes with a wife, he can leave with a wife. But if his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her masters. Her masters. Okay? And he shall go out by himself. So if he takes a wife while he's a servant, if his master gives him the wife and then they have children, after that 6th year's over, he can leave, but she and the children can't. And that's one of the reasons why they would recommit themselves for another 6 years in many cases. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not accept my freedom. I will not go out free. He doesn't want to accept his freedom because he doesn't want to leave his wife and his children or his master if he is happy working for him. In verse 6, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door or unto the doorpost. And his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, A-U-L. Let's look at the definition of awl. He's getting a pierced ear is what it's saying, A-U-L. Really? No definition found. Okay, that's interesting. So, but it's like an earring, okay? It says, his master shall bore his ear through the lobe part with an awl, A-U-L. Yes, Troy. It's A-U-L in my Bible. Oh, interesting. Okay, let me look for the alternate spelling. A-W-L in some translations. A small pointed tool used for piercing holes, especially in leather. So he's getting his ear pierced. So his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. He says, if he says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, and I don't want to be set free without them, then he gets his ear pierced, and he will be able to stay forever there in his master's house and continue to be a servant, like a job. Okay? And if a man tell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. So this is saying, if a man sell his daughter, who sells their daughters? I mean, that's to be a maidservant. She shall not go out like the men servants do in the 7th year. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself. Now, see, if a man sells his daughter to be the maidservant, the man is taking her and betrothing her to himself to be his wife. Now he says here, if she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. Means she can be purchased back by her family. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall have no power. He can sell her back to her family, but he cannot sell her to anyone who is not a Hebrew or her family, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. So if she's betrothed to him and he decides he doesn't want to marry her, he has dealt deceitfully with her. And he must let her be redeemed by her family. In verse 9, and if he hath betrothed her unto his son, and he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. So he's saying if he takes another wife, he cannot set aside the first one. He cannot give what belongs to the first one to the second one. He has to let the first one keep her food, her clothing, and her duty of marriage. He must share a room with her, or at least at night in some cases. He says, her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. He must still have children with her, give her children. In verse 11, and if he do not these three unto her, these three, make sure she has her food, her clothes, and that he tends to her physical needs and gives her children. If he does not do those three things, then shall she go out free without money. If he doesn't do those things, she can leave. In verse 12, he that smiteth a man so that he die. Now, if you get into a fight with somebody and they fall and hit their head on a rock or whatever and die, he that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. That means when you fight somebody, you fight with your fists and you do not pick up a weapon. Because if you kill that person, you are going to be put to death. In verse 13, and if a man lie not in wait, that means you're sneaking around waiting for somebody to come by so you can jump out at him. If a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. Now what this is saying is if he is not purposing, if he's not lying in wait to attack this person, So if he lies in wait to attack them and kills them, he's dead meat. But if he doesn't, if it's something that happens spontaneously, if a man lie not in wait, he's not trying to kill someone, but he does. But God deliver him into his hand. Then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. There were sanctuary cities. And we know what that means in America. You've got sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants here. And a lot of them are criminals that are needing to flee to these sanctuary cities. And if you're not a criminal, you don't need a sanctuary city. In verse 14, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile. Do you know what guile is? Guile. That's sly or cunning intelligence. So he says, if a man, this is verse 14 of Exodus 21, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with sly or cunning intelligence, that's guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. If you go to somebody's house with the intentions of slaying them, you are in serious trouble. In verse 15, and he that smiteth his father or his mother, you don't hit your mom or dad, ever, for any cause, shall be surely put to death. And that's bad. You don't ever want to do that. In verse 16, and he that stealeth a man and selleth him. It's kind of like Joseph. Joseph didn't go into slavery of his own accord. He was held captive and sold against his will. So it says, and he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. We're down at the bottom of the hour. Troy's going to take us to a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to start again in Exodus chapter 21 and verse 17. Don't go away. Straight up.